Hola, Kaisho, Salut. I'm breaking out some other languages today, man.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back.
We are back 2 months, 6 new listeners later after our most recent episodes. We've been popping off
6 million, right?
6 billion, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're at three
Why would it be
quarters.
any less, though?
I don't know. 3/4 of the world's
We're
not
going
left.
crazy. We're viral. We're finally fit. No, but it's been a while. It's been a long time. It's good to be
Yep.
back. How are you
Yep.
doing, Derek?
Good, man. Good. Happy to be here. Got some good stuff to talk about today.
It's Thanksgiving Eve. They say it's the
When we're recording this, we'll see
yeah.
when this gets posted. But
They say Thanksgiving Eve is one of the craziest nights in America, but here we are, me and
yeah,
you, spending our Thanksgiving Eve talking about languages. As usual, there's nothing better. There's no crazier plan
cheers.
we could have had. And let's just jump right into it, man. So our
Yep.
topic for today, something we've talked about based on our own experiences and something that's just been on the top of our mind, is the difference between mastering a language and mastering a language class.
hmm
Because I think a lot of people in the United States especially have taken a language class, whether it's for 1 semester, 1 year, 8 years, no matter how long it may be. And we feel like this is a really like important distinction
hmm
and an important difference that people should recognize. So,
Definitely.
what better way, as any common person would, to
Yep.
put this super complex linguistic phenomenon into NBA terms?
Yep. So that's what we know best. So maybe second best. Anyways, yeah. So we're gonna start talking about the Joker, aka Nikola Jokic. He is widely regarded as one of the best, or if not the best player in the NBA for like 5 years now.
How many MVPs has he won?
Three.
How
So
many? You said we just talked about
it,
this before we recorded. How many should he have won?
or should he? I don't. It's debatable, but he could have won five. He was second twice, and he has a good case at winning this year. So it's pretty crazy. But anyways, he's not your typical athlete, right? The typical NBA athlete can jump out the gym, is super quick, super athletic, and stuff like that. He's a bit doughy, has a bit more of a dad bod kind of thing. Like he's yeah, there's just nothing physically spectacular about him. Yet here he is. Well, not here, right? He's in Denver, but he's one of the most amazing players in the NBA, right? Um, and there's a lot of reasons for, like I was saying, that he shouldn't have been so good, right? So there's like a pre-draft combine before the players are selected, where they go through a series of drills and tests and stuff like that, and it's supposed to determine their athleticism and various other things to see if they're going to be a good player based on those things, right? Um, and he didn't really test well because he can't jump, right? So a lot of NBA players have like a 40-inch vertical. His was not that good, right? He can't really. People joke sometimes that if he jumped, you couldn't fit a book under his feet. But he's still so effective, right? And it's like his lateral quickness. He's not like overly muscular. He's not very cut. He's a higher body fat percentage. So all these things, but there's a lot of other things that make him amazing at basketball that you can't necessarily measure or you can't really quantify with physical metrics, right?
I've had so many conversations with people as well who, again, I'm not personally the absolute biggest NBA fan. Obviously, I know who Jokic is. I love the adjective doughy, by the way. I've never heard that used
Yeah.
as an adjective, but it's a good adjective. And that's nothing against Jokic. But like you said, you look at him, and also if you look at his draft profile, he was drafted with 2014. He was drafted
Mm-hmm.
as the 41st overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to draft him solely based on, like you said, his vert, his athleticism, his scores, or whatever these assessments of the draft combine, these things are assessing for, probably wouldn't have even been drafted
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to judge his talent strictly on those scores alone, you probably would not think he's that great of a basketball player.
Yeah.
But Jokic, I'm going to use the word here, intangibles. You watch him play,
Mm-hmm.
and then like you actually see him do what he's supposed to be doing, which is play basketball. He's a three-time MVP.
Mm-hmm.
He's won the finals. He
Mm-hmm.
can hoop unlike anyone we've ever seen before
Mm-hmm.
because he has those intangibles. His,
Mm-hmm.
his IQ, the way he sees these
Yeah.
passing lanes, his presence, his leadership, his love for horses back in Serbia. No.
Yeah.
But if these intangibles that make him a great basketball player, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, the way he rebounds,
Mm-hmm.
the lanes that he sees, the angles of the basket, that make him, which makes him one of the most
Yeah.
fun
His
players.
touch. You
His
can't
touch,
measure touch.
exactly.
And he has tremendous touch, especially for someone his size.
So those things we just mentioned, how do you put a score on that?
Mm-hmm.
And even his other things in the combine, like obviously the vertical, obviously, yeah, it can measure how you jump from point A to point B in that specific moment, but does that measure how you jump in game with other
Mm-hmm.
factors going on too?
Yeah.
And we see this with language learning because when you look at a language learning class, your grade in the class is assessing not your ability to speak the language. Your grade in the class is a reflection of the assessments that you've taken in that class. It's an assessment of, for example, let's break it down into 4 different components:
Mm-hmm.
reading, writing, speaking, listening, which a lot of classes don't even measure
Yeah.
those equally. But let's say, and if it does, if you have an 80% in reading, but then a 95% in writing, and then a 70% in listening, these are your scores. That doesn't mean how you actually do it in real life. Maybe, yeah, it has something to do with it, but that's not exactly how it should be measured. It's with language learning, we feel like those intangibles are not just reflective of those scores, but the intangibles, kind of like the intangibles of Jokic in a basketball, is your ability to go out and be brave and vulnerable and speak the language, being able to deal with making mistakes, and your language IQ. We would say it's about being able to use the words that you know to convey meaning. It's not about memorizing 90 vocabulary words that your teacher gave you and, oh, you know 89 of them. Well, yeah, you're fluent in Spanish because you know those words. No, if you memorize 89 of them, you don't know how to use them in real context. But if you memorize 40 and you know how to use them and convey meaning about talking about things around you, then that's way more valuable than simply memorizing a list of vocab.
Yeah. No, yeah, because like memorization is one thing. Like we all learned the Pythagorean theorem, right? And it doesn't really apply to our daily lives, right? And I think that's kind of one of the issues I have with language learning in school, right? Is it's taught like it's math, and it's not math, you know. So like what you're saying about these language intangibles, something else that's like you can't really measure on a piece of paper, but it's like, is that student, what are they doing outside of school? Are they going home? Are they consuming input that we've talked a lot about, right? Are they fitting the language into their lives and stuff like that? Because that's a way that they could improve tremendously that might not show up on a test. But if you talk to them or if you test their comprehension or whatever, right, it's tremendous. And yeah, so like a lot of the times English class or second language classes, especially here, only focus on like your reading comprehension or your conjugation of verbs or whatever, and they don't even touch on speaking or listening, which is a shame, right? Because that's the whole point of a language learning class. It's to master the language, not master the class, right? So like you can be getting an A+ in Spanish but not really speak much. That was the case for both of us when we were in high school Spanish. We were both really good students, but we didn't really speak much until we actually did something with it, right? So I think that kind of gets lost a little bit, right? So because the goal of a language learning class is to learn that language. Why do you want to learn that language? You want to communicate, right? But we don't really do that very often in the class, right? So it's like it doesn't really matter. Like you could be getting an A+ in Spanish and not be speaking the language very well, which is something that we both did, you know, because the structure of the class doesn't really test how you're speaking or how you're interacting with people and stuff like that, you know. So I think that the structure of classes, it kind of forces us to lose sight of how to learn the language, and for a pun, it gets lost in translation. We're not able to yeah, we focus on the wrong things a lot of the time. Not always, right? And there's benefits to class and stuff like that, but a lot of the times we focus on the wrong things.
And our goal is not to come out here and roast all of your Spanish teachers and criticize every single Spanish class that you're in, because I think a lot of teachers are doing the best that they can, because it's not a problem of the teacher per se. It's a matter of, okay, well, it's the setting that you're in.
Yeah, the
Like
curriculum,
you
right?
can't,
Yeah.
how do you take a graduation requirement and then also be able to measure students' ability to speak a language
Mm-hmm.
outside
Yeah.
of class and use it in their own lives when everyone was living different lives and has
Mm-hmm.
different exposure to the language. But I think you bring up a really good point about getting lost in translation. And I think that lost translation when it comes to measuring students' accuracy in grammar,
Mm-hmm.
if you actually if you measured our accuracy in grammar of speaking English every day, I guarantee
Mm-hmm.
you it's not 100%.
Oh yeah.
Because we make, it's
All
not
yeah,
proper English.
yeah, all these the casual conversation, right? It's like if we were writing an essay, it'd be completely different.
Yeah. No, and you take that, it's not going to be 100%. So,
Mm-hmm.
A, why is there so much heavy focus on this?
Yeah.
And B, that heavy focus on grammar raises the stakes in
Mm-hmm.
making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you were to take a grammar test or an activity or whatever and you conjugate it the wrong way, that heavy approach on grammar, and you make a mistake, all that focus on grammar in the class, and then you make that mistake, you feel like, oh shoot, I'm not grasping the material. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying grammar isn't important, but when you make a mistake in school, you lose points on your assignment, which in
Mm-hmm.
turn affects your grade, or you miss points on an exam, which also affects your grade. And then you're like, oh my gosh, my grade's going down. This graduation, you go down this spiral just from
Mm-hmm.
one grammar mistake. When in
Yeah.
reality, when you're just speaking the way it is, if I say, sí, ayer yo tuve mucho que hacer,
Mm-hmm.
it should be yo tuve, but you know what I'm saying. The
Yeah.
person who you're
It's
talking to is most
understood.
likely
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
stay, and most of the time, it's
It's
not
a
even going
slip
to
of
be
the
brought
tongue,
up.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's and it discourages you, because it's like you're learning. You have to be vulnerable, like you were saying. You have to be willing to expose yourself in that setting and make mistakes. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can grow. You know, and I think um, that's kind of the issue, right? Is so kind of bringing it to the principle of specificity, right? Which is essentially if you want to get better at something, you need to do it. So if you want to get better at Spanish and you want to be able to talk to someone, right? So if you're breaking down what do you need in order to be able to talk to someone, you need to be able to understand what they're saying to you, and you need to be able to respond to them. Those are the only two things that really matter. Your grammar doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to be able to write an essay in Spanish, right? It's just you need to be able to do those two things. Um, and so, how do you do that, right? Oh, you want to be able to understand what they're saying? You need to listen, and just listen a ton. And we've talked about how to incorporate language learning in your daily life and just input, comprehensible input, right? And you start with something that you understand and it's relatively simple, even if it's made for a kid. And then eventually you graduate into like regular Netflix TV shows or YouTube that are made for regular native speakers of that language, right? And then for speaking, language partners, language exchanges, just talking to people at a Mexican restaurant or whatever, right? Like we've talked about this sort of thing, right? So it's just if the goal of a Spanish class or any language class is to speak that language and improve in that language, they spend a very small portion of, or a very small amount of time relative to everything else actually doing that because they focus on these other things because it's the structure that it has to have you have to be able to give a grade on it, you know, and it's much harder to quantify it. So I think it kind of fell into this thing. It's like where we're teaching languages like we teach math, with you're trying to memorize these things rather than applying them. So yeah, it's the principle of specificity. If you don't speak, you're not going to get better at speaking. You can do a lot of things that will help, but it's not going to perfectly help. Or it's not going to, you can't really get better at speaking without speaking, right? So like a silly example or analogy is if you're learning to drive a car, you're not going to spend 3 days reading the owner's manual. No, if you're trying to, like, you might skim it, maybe, but you're
It's
going to
good to
need to,
know why eventually, but
yeah,
it's there if you need it.
yeah.
But
But like at some point, you need to get behind the wheel and try to learn to drive. That's the only way to really do it.
mhm.
You can learn the theoretical component of it and why this happens, and you can learn the physics behind what happens when you brake and when you turn the wheel and all this stuff. But if you want to drive, you got to drive, and if you want to speak the language, you got to speak the language.
I think when you apply that principle into that concept of the, like you said, the math-based approach. I love
Mm-hmm.
math. Don't, this is no knock on math. But when you teach language as this plug and chug of, okay, there's only one answer based off of what comes before it, like an equation.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that principle of specificity, think about what you're doing in those exercises, in that heavy approach
Mm-hmm.
is like you're just filling in sentences, for example, about, Juan fue a la biblioteca. Do you know who this Juan guy is?
Mystery.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so the answer is fue. He went. So we're talking about the past tense, and he went to the library. Well, what library? There's billions of libraries, not billions, millions of libraries in the world.
Yeah.
We don't know when, we don't know where. That has nothing to do with me. So if I'm mastering this ability to fill in random sentences about random people, then next time I see you in person, Derek, I'm going to start talking to you about, and if I want to practice my Spanish, if I want to practice what I'm learning in class, I'm just going to be like, sí, Juan fue a la biblioteca, mis amigos tuvieron mucha comida ayer. I'm just going to be giving random sentences about random things that have nothing to do with us in our environment around us.
But you're speaking Spanish.
Yeah, and that's the difference of mastering a language between mastering what is taught in your classes. Those concepts do apply, but because you want to learn those grammar rules, but that's not actually using those rules to talk about yourself and talk about things that are around you and things in your life.
Yeah. There's a time and a place for it, and it's at the end of the day, if you want to be good at anything, you need to dedicate time to it, right? So the issue with assigning grades and having these grammatical tests and stuff like that is a lot of times the students can feel like they're failing or they're a failure because they're not understanding something, right? But it's like in real life, you make a mistake, you're talking to someone, you make a mistake, yeah, it might be a little misunderstanding, but you learn from it. There's so many examples that I've had where that's how I know the difference between this word and that word, because I made a mistake and it became a memorable moment. Like I associated it with something, like talking to a friend or whatever, and it's something you look back at and you laugh about, you know. But it's part of learning, right? It's part of learning. It's part of how you develop and how your brain forms these connections so that you can continue improving.
And I think like what you mentioned about having those learning mistakes from specific moments, because that becomes a memory. Like for example, when I was in Spain, when I was talking, I think I've showed this story on this podcast before, but I'm going to say it again. When I was talking with one of my friends, one of my coworkers actually at a pregame for a soccer game, we were talking, and I was like, this DJ was playing some reggaeton, some of my favorite songs, and I was vibing. I was like, heck yes, we love reggaeton.
Yep.
And I was listening to the music, and I told him, I was like, I made the connection between ser and estar. I was thinking about that. In the moment, my brain just thought, oh, right now, temporarily, this DJ is really good. So, wow, sí. Oye, ahora este DJ está muy bueno. Está muy bueno. And my coworker just starts laughing.
Yep.
And I was like, what? He was
Well,
like,
why are you laughing, right?
He's like, you know what you just said, right? And I was like, no. He's like, estar bueno means that person's attractive. Ser bueno means he's a good DJ, even though it's right now. And we all just laughed it off. And I was embarrassed in the moment, but at the end of the day, I laughed it off. And do you think I'm ever going to make that mistake again anytime that comes up in my mind? Because there's that memory attached
ingrained,
to it.
Yeah.
And it makes for a funny story. And in the moment, you might feel, oh my gosh, I just made this mistake, but it's going to serve you in the long run.
No, yeah. And like taking it back to the school example, like I remember taking high school Spanish, and there were a few native speakers or heritage speakers in my class, and I remember them struggling. And like I was doing well on like if I did well on like a quiz that we had about direct object pronouns, right? And they struggled with them, or conjugating in the preterite tense or whatever it was, right? Like it kind of blew my mind, because I was like, I know for a fact that these people speak Spanish and speak Spanish way better than I do and might ever, right? But they're struggling with this, but it's because it's testing something completely different, right? It's like it's still Spanish that's being tested, but you're not testing someone's ability to speak. You're testing their ability to make conjugations and to memorize vocab words about a mall or about vegetables. And it's like, I don't even like vegetables, but it's like that was one of the first things I learned in Spanish, was how to say like 30 different vegetables.
Oh, I know you don't like vegetables, so you don't need to remind me.
But it doesn't really apply to me, unless I'm saying I don't want that. But other than that, it doesn't really change my life. It doesn't really improve my life unless like, so you want to learn things that are interesting to you. You don't want to feel like the rejection or like you're being scolded for having made a mistake in a class, right? Because in reality, if you're getting like punished for it by having a bad grade or something like that, you're less likely to pursue that outside of class, which means you're dedicating less time to it, which in turn means you're not going to really be progressing, right? And if you want to be elite at anything or good or great at anything, you need to kind of do it on your own. And in order to do it on your own, you need to enjoy it.
You need to be willing to make mistakes and fail in the process,
Yeah.
which is like anything in life, no matter what you want to learn. But
Yep.
I think these strategies that you mentioned earlier, memorization, what classes are testing for is your ability to learn and explicitly learn vocabulary and these grammar rules. And this is a whole other ball game, and we want to open this can, I think, with our next episode or in 2 episodes, whenever you want to do it.
Yeah.
But the difference between learning a language and acquiring a language, two completely different strategies. It might seem similar, might sound similar, but this is a whole other ball game that we're gonna a whole other can of worms that we're gonna open up, and we'll see if we can put it in NBA terms again. I don't really know, but
boy.
it might be.
How will it affect LeBron's legacy?
Sneak preview. Spoiler alert for our next episode.
Yeah.
But I think, in summary, what you can take away from this is think of Jokic. Think of his explicit numbers, his draft profile. You look at him and you see his athleticism and these scores that are measuring and then saying everything that he shouldn't be a great player. And he's a 3-time MVP. Yeah. And he's won an NBA Finals. He might win more. He probably will win more. And the same thing with learning a language in class. You guys have these scores in your language classes, which, yes, obviously, we're not saying don't try in those classes. Show up to class tomorrow and just, say I'm done, whatever. This doesn't matter anymore. It does matter. Try. It's a work ethic. Yeah. It's still going to serve you in the long run. But what we're saying is don't let your grade in a class deter you from going out to actually go out and speak the language.
Yeah. And side note, if anyone is listening and doesn't know what Jokic looks like, just please go on Google Images and type in Nikola Jokic, right? And you'll see he just looks like a normal dude. He's 7 feet tall. But other than that, nothing about him screams really, really, really good basketball.
You said it best. You said he was doughy, and that's nothing against him, but he is. Yeah. That's just a great word to describe him.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah. So, anyways, don't be fooled by a C in Spanish or an A in Spanish. Don't let it get to your head, I guess, right? But just the important thing is that you're enjoying the language, you're enjoying the process, and you're focusing and dedicating time to it and improving on that. So
trust the process.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
With that being said, I think we've got nothing more about Jokic or the NBA or this distinction. This wraps it up for today. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, LangerGoesPodcast@gmail.com. Slide into our Instagram DMs. We'll respond, I promise. YouTube, I guess, has private messages too. I don't really know. You guys know how to get in contact with us. Yeah. Check us out, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Instagram, whatever it may be. Yep. And gosh, how do you say goodbye in Catalan? I forgot.
I don't know.
In Euskera is agur, I think. We're gonna study our ways of saying goodbye.
That's on you, man.
All right.
But anyways, thank you everyone. Until next time, we appreciate it, and we'll be back.